So we're going to go ahead and start working on our retouching of this photo, and we're going to learn some different tools. And before we actually get into the tools, I do want to just mention a common problem that a lot of beginning level Photoshop users make. So by default, I have this file set up so that we have a before layer that we can come back and look at all of the damages that were there before we retouched it. We have a retouching layer, which is where we're going to make all of our edits. And then we actually, we may possibly have more layers than that, but this is a starting point. And then the levels adjustment layer is what we've added to be able to change our tonal quality. So you can see how it's basically added a little bit of extra tonal values for us. With that said, if this is highlighted and we try to retouch anything right now, it is not going to work. So we do want to make sure we select the layer we want to work on. If you do happen to have auto select activated, it may possibly work on the layer that you want, but in some cases I've noticed it actually does not. So I actually prefer to select the layer I want to work on and then come over here and start finding the retouching tools that we're going to use. So we're going to start with one of the most common retouching tools, which is the clone stamp. And this basically is a type of retouching tool that allows you to paint with pixels that are existing in your document. So when I click on it, you will notice there's another tool underneath. I can't say I use that one as much, so we're just going to click on clone stamp. And you see this circle appears, and this circle is basically an option so that we can use this kind of like a paintbrush to paint pixels. So before we actually start moving pixels around, we have to understand how to test the pixels in our document so that it knows where we're going to start with. So right now we are zoomed in. Let me zoom in just a little bit closer. And we're going to just start correcting some of this. We're going to hold down Option, and when you do, this allows you to sample a part of your document. So I'll sample right here, and then when I move it over, it basically moves these pixels wherever I want it to go. Okay. You will notice with a lot of these tools you have options up at the top. So right now I have the opacity at 100. If I wanted to be able to make it so that they blend a little bit, you may decide to decrease that opacity a little bit, or perhaps the flow, which is kind of like how fast the pixels or the paint comes out of a brush. So you do have that option to change those. The other cool option is, and this is very common with any brush tool, is you have the option of the size of a brush or the hardness of the brush. Okay, so if it goes to 100%, it's going to be a perfect circle, and if it's down to like 20%, it's going to be more soft, and then of course 0 is even softer. So you do have a lot of options. You even have different types of brushes, which we'll continue to learn about this semester. Now as you're working, you may not want to come back up to this little brush panel every time. You should be able to click Control, and then it comes up right there for you. The other thing is, we don't necessarily want to sit here and play around with these little sliders changing sizes, because that takes us more time. So we actually want to make sure we understand how to change the size of this brush as we use it. So if you look above your quote mark key, and it's pretty close to the return key, there's two brackets. The left bracket is going to make this brush smaller, and the right bracket will make it larger. And you'll see that it's kind of previewing the pixels that it's going to change based off of where you did test last. So if I test down here where it's lighter, you're going to see as we go over here, like that's a huge contrast in pixels, and that's probably not going to look good. And I'll just show you one. Like that's very noticeable, and that's not going to work. So you do want to test often. You are probably going to change your brush size up or down, and you are going to basically just go in and start retouching. Now the clone stamp tool is just one tool. We are actually going to get in and teach you a bunch of different tools. The reason why I love the clone stamp is it does literally move pixels. However, if you start testing and you don't test often, you will start to notice pixels repeat a lot, and it'll look really sloppy. So you do want to make sure you're testing often. The one time where I really use clone stamp more than the other tools that we're going to demonstrate is when we get along areas where we have like a contrast. So you see this light and dark contrast in this photo right here. I basically will select right along this edge, and usually if you match it up, like that's pretty close. And we might go in and kind of soften right along the edge here just a little bit more, but that is going to help you get a better example of pixels than what we're going to get with some of the other tools, which we'll demonstrate in just a moment.